is with us forever. And I believe they could do miracles and could read my mind.
I laughed when you wrote that later when the Christian missionaries tried to teach you about God the Father and his son Jesus. You thought of God as Kim Il-sung and Jesus as Kim Jong-il.
Yeah, the other defectors told me that it's very easy, just change the name there and everything makes sense.
And even after you were out of North Korea for a long time, living in safety in South Korea, didn't you still sometimes imagine that Kim Jong-il could read your mind?
Oh, yes, it was a journey. To be free physically was very easy, but the free emotionally was extremely hard. And that was the other process I had to go through after the escape. And also I believed that Kim Jong-il could read my mind. I have to defend my leader even if I left the country.
That's what they taught you at school?
In school, yes. They taught us how our leader defending us from our enemies, which is American bastards, and they were keep us alive and give us food.
What about your mother, who had lived there a lot longer? Was it harder for her to make an adjustment? Or was she also brainwashed in the same way?
It was harder for her, and it's still harder for her to have a bad feeling towards Kim Il-sung, the first founder. It's easy.
Because she was alive when he was still alive.
Yes, and still lots of North Korean defectors have a very big bond to Kim Il-sung, the first founder. But relatively, Kim Jong-il is easy because most of the time, Kim Jong-il's time, lots of people died for the starvation, and it was a very difficult time.
But also, weren't people starting to learn more about what was going on in the outside world? North Korea is pretty insulated, but you can't completely close off borders.
Yes, there's some information getting in. That's how I also watched the movie Titanic while I was in North Korea. But still, the information that is getting in, there's not as much as it can against the what government's teaching us, because brainwash is everywhere.
And you're also seeing some pretty horrific things like dead people in the street. They died from starvation?
Yeah, lots of people were about to die and they were asking food and help, and other people died, and maybe from disease and starvation together.
You were selling stuff on black market when you were 11 years old just to get through?
Yes, I also sold persimmon in the black market, and I had to just do anything to keep us alive in the country.
And you've described yourself as being part of North Korea's first black market generation. So you weren't alone.
Yes, the market system emerged after 1990s. The Soviet Union collapsed. In North Korea, they stopped public distribution, and people had to feed themselves, and that was trading. And once people traded for themselves, they could think for themselves.
Well, when you say trading, yeah, you're bartering, but it also is a way of bribing, isn't it?
Yes,
you bribed a guard with wine that you had.
Yeah, those were like our rice local in North Korea.
Now, how did that work? Because in North Korea, wasn't it illegal to buy and sell things? That would have been considered free enterprise. Yeah,
it is illegal. But if the government didn't allow people to trade, then the whole population is gonna die except the elite people. And that's millions of people died in just few years. And I think government had no choice, and they let the people to trade.
So they just looked the other way?
Yeah, and then still there's very strict restriction behind it.
You saw Titanic, you said. Also heard music from outside, other things? And was it from China, or was it from the United States, or from South Korea?
I think it was music. I don't know if you know who's modern talking. I was listening to American music too, and it was smuggling from China.
Now, once you wound up in South Korea, you established a pretty interesting career where you were able to go to school, but you said that there's a certain amount of uh, well, people look down on North Koreans. Did you have to fight that kind of prejudice?
Oh, yes, it was extremely hard for me. I had to, just in the beginning, I realized I'm not trustworthy and I'm not a hard worker because I'm from communist country, and people had those stereotypes already towards us.
But you also came from a place where you were told what to think and what to do. Once you got to South Korea, was it difficult to start thinking for yourself?
Absolutely, that was the most hardest thing. It was really hard to think for myself because I never realized that was important.
To form your own opinions?
Yes. I just didn't know what I think, why does that matter. I just wanted somebody to tell me what to do with my life, or what to wear, or what to buy, what to study.
What was happening with your mother? You were still, even when you got to South Korea, you were about 15 years old, 16?
I was 15 years old.
So you were still a child?
Yes, but since I was 13 years old, I was never a child, so...
You feel that that you were forced to grow up very fast?
Yeah, I had to.
Now, so you went to school. That school must have been odd because it was very different than the school that you had gone to in North Korea.
Yeah, I didn't go to South Korean public school. I tried, but I saw the discrimination, and the kids, they just don't know anything, so they can be sometimes very mean. And I chose to go to a defector school, and I taught myself most of the time.
There's a defector school.
Yes.
Did they teach you how to speak with a South Korean accent?
No, most defector schools are very religious, so they teach gospel, but I was watching South Korean TV shows and learning South Korean accent.
You spent a lot of time searching for your sister.
Yes.
Do you know what happened to her?
I didn't know what had happened to her, and all I could do was just finding her anywhere, and that's how I decided to get on the TV show.
So what kind of work did you do on the TV show? Not everybody, you just don't say, I want to go on a TV show.
It was a talk show, and it was also an entertainment show, and they bring North Korean female in the beginning to the show and South Korean celebrities, and they talk about the life in North Korea and the defectors adjustment in South Korea. And it's very light but sometimes very serious show.
But it's also a parody of North Korean life.
Right.
Which is a form of propaganda as well. We've been reading recently about the propaganda war between the North and the South, where the South has been blasting rock and roll and I guess soap operas and other things toward the North. Do you think that's a good policy?
It's really hard to say, but I believe any kinds of outside information is very important, because North Korean people, they just don't know what's going on. They don't know they are isolated. That's how much they are isolated.
So you were on television and you told your story, and you were hoping, I assume, that your sister would see you on TV. Did she?
No, she did not. But when she came to South Korea, she found us.
She did find you?
Yes.
But she'd been in China longer?
She has been in China for 7 years.
So she is in effect Chinese, because she probably speaks Chinese Mandarin very well.
But as a North Korean defector, she was hiding for 7 years, that long time.
Wow. So tell us about what you're doing now. Where do you live?
I live in New York, and I cannot believe I'm in New York now. My enemy country.
You were growing up with the idea that the United States was the worst place in the world.
Absolutely, I never knew in this country the people lived. I thought Americans didn't have any heat, and my math problem in school was like, there are 4 American ambassadors, you kill 2 of them, and how many American ambassadors left to kill? And that was our math club running.
Really?
Korea.
They taught you about killing Americans in the math class?
Yeah, everything is propaganda, and anything in North Korea is because of Americans. So it's very surreal for me to be in New York now.
And how long have you been here?
I've been here very short time. I came here last November for the first time. So I was been and off, but I just moved recently.
And what are you going to be doing other than your activism for refugees?
I am looking forward to study,
Mhm.
and I have not had any education, but I'm really looking forward to have education with my life.
You've been active in efforts to help refugees from North Korea, but I'm sure you've been following the story of all the refugees from Syria and the other troubled areas of the Middle East. Do you think that your experience gives you a different perspective on what they are going through than the rest of us may have?
Oh, yeah, it's very.
I mean, you do desperation.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's very different. It's very personal. I remember when I was standing in that desert and looking at the stars.
In the Gobi Desert.
Yeah, and then I thought only the stars were with me, and I thought nobody cared in this world. And I even thought this earth even is abandoned us. But these people on the ocean, and I can feel how lonely it can be and how scary it can be. So.
Do you think that Americans really know what's going on in North Korea? To some degree, Kim Jong-un, the current leader, there's a dynasty. It's interesting that we're talking about almost the equivalent of kings in a communist country, but he becomes an object of parody. People make fun of him because they think he looks funny. And should we be taking him more seriously?
I think, yeah, of course, Kim Jong-un is a joke in the West, and nobody thinks of him seriously. But I think there is a urgency. He is not just a joke and funny character there. He is a murderer. He's a criminal. He kills millions of innocent people.
Are people still starving?
Absolutely, yeah.
And are we seeing an increase in the number of refugees coming out of North Korea?
No, he searched the border then, in a way, most crazy way than his father. He had a shoot to kill order, so anybody who crossed the border, they would get shot. And he has the wire fence, and he just not let people to go to river certain time. So he has a crazy policy to prevent this defect.
They also put mines along the border.
Yes, so not many people can escape now. Only a few people can make it.
Did you leave much family behind?
Yes, all my relatives back in North Korea.
Are you at all optimistic that change will happen in North Korea? Because over the years we keep on reading that North Korea will have to change. The famine, the fact that they have to negotiate with the West on other things, and yet it doesn't seem to have changed. And even with the new leader who we're told was more sophisticated, Kim Jong-un had been to Paris, wasn't he? Or
I think Switzerland.
he likes basketball, hangs out with Dennis Rodman,
Right.
but that doesn't seem to have changed anything.
I think, yes, change will come. And I think a change in North Korea is inevitable. And yeah, and I think whatever happens, North Korean people, they don't deserve what they are going through now.
Would you go back just for a visit if it were possible?
I think I would go back when the country is free.
You're going to wait until...
But now I will be
You may never go
executed.
back. I'm sorry about that, Yumi.
I will bring the liberty in North Korea and then go back someday.
Yumi will be at the Korea Society this Thursday at 6:30. That's at 960 3rd Avenue on the 8th floor. And her book is called In Order to Live, A North Korean Girl's Journey to Freedom, written with the help of Marianne Bollers and published by Penguin Press. Did you propose writing this book? Or did Marianne Bollers suggest that you do it? because the story is so powerful.
It was so everybody wanted. I wanted to write a book. The Penguin wanted it. Marion wanted it. So everybody wanted it.
Thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you so much. It's my honor to be here.
On tomorrow's show, Judy Blume is the next special guest for our Leonard Lopate Show Book Club. She will look back at her career writing fiction for young readers and also tell us about her new novel for adults called In the Unlikely Event. And then Laurie Anderson discusses her artistic collaboration with a former Guantanamo Bay inmate. We will speak with the curators of the new Picasso sculpture exhibit at MoMA, and political economist Robert Reich describes why the economic system that helped make America strong is now failing and what he feels it will take to fix it. The Leonard Lopate Show is produced by Stephen Valentino, Anna Sahara Plotnik, Jessica Miller, and Jenna Cagle. Melissa Egan's the executive producer. Dave Emmett was at the audio controls, and we had help today from Ben J., Chelsea Klopp, and contributing producers Virginia Doris and Angela Sheldon. I'm Leonard Lopate, your host. Thanks for listening. We will see you tomorrow.
WNYC support comes from Master Voices, presenting Gilbert and Sullivan's The Pirates of Penzance, featuring Deborah Voigt, Douglas Hodge, and Orchestra of St. Luke's, conducted by Ted Sperling, October 15th and 16th at New York City Center. Tickets at nycitycenter.org.
Unlike his brother Fidel, who holds a record for the longest speech at the UN, Raul Castro barely ran over the recommended 15-minute slot, but he kept up the usual critique of U.S. meddling, not just in Cuba, but also Venezuela.
It's not just the news, it's your next conversation. Hear it on Morning Edition and be ready to make the most of your day. Listen every morning on WNYC.
Today on Fresh Air, Terry Gross talks with Dr. James O'Connell about his 20 years treating the homeless in Boston on the streets and in shelters. O'Connell's new memoir is called Stories from the Shadows. That's today at 2 on 93.9 FM.
This is WNYC, FM, HD, and AM, New York. Just keep listening.
From WHYY in Philadelphia, I'm Terry Gross with Fresh Air. Today, physician James O'Connell, whose patients are homeless people living on the streets of Boston and in shelters.
We see dramatic things that I never saw in medical school or even in the textbooks.
Like a man whose body was infested with maggots, and a patient with a psychotic disorder who
got frostbite of both feet really severely, and he elected to not do surgery, and we spent the past year watching his feet fall off, which is what happens at the end stages of frostbite.
O'Connell is the president of the Boston Healthcare for the Homeless program. He has a new memoir called Stories from the Shadows, Reflections of a Street Doctor. Also,
this is The Daily Show with Trevor Noah.
TV critic David Bianculli has a review of last night's debut. That's coming up on Fresh Air. First News.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The leaders of the U.S. and Cuba are expressing their alliance following decades of animosity between their nations. Presidents Barack Obama and Raul Castro spoke today on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York City. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports Cuba wants the U.S. to contribute more toward both nations' newfound partnership.
It was their second meeting this year, and President Obama and Cuba's Raul Castro seemed at ease with each other, despite their differences over human rights and other issues. Cuba's foreign minister came out of the meeting saying his country wants Obama to further ease travel and trade restrictions. It would take an act of Congress to lift the embargo, but the president has been using his executive authorities to ease many of the limits. U.S. experts say Cuba needs to do its part to allow U.S. businesses in. Another thorny issue is the fate of the U.S. naval base at Guantanamo Bay. Castro says relations can't be normal until Cuba gets that back. U.S. officials have said that's not on the table. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the United Nations.
The president of Planned Parenthood is testifying before House panel for the first time since her organization was accused of illegally profiting from the sale of fetal tissue for medical research. Cecile Richards is fighting Republican attempts in Congress to defund Planned Parenthood.
While the federal policy, in my opinion, discriminates against low-income women, no federal funds pay for abortion services at Planned Parenthood or anywhere else, except in the very limited circumstances allowed by law. These are when the woman has been raped, has been the victim of incest or when her life is endangered.
Congressional anger mounted following the release of secretly taped and edited video about Planned Parenthood. The Taliban are said to be taking up positions across a northern Afghan city they seized yesterday. After losing Kunduz in a surprise attack, local troops backed by U.S. warplanes launched a counteroffensive today. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani is asking the war-weary nation to have faith in Afghanistan's forces fighting to take back Kunduz. The Volkswagen scandal is growing. The company's subsidiary in Spain says 700,000 of its cars were fitted with the diesel engine in question. Lauren Freyer has the latest from Madrid.
SEAT, the Spanish subsidiary of Volkswagen, has halted all sales of commercial vehicles with the EA189 diesel engine. That's the one outfitted with software to cheat on diesel emissions tests. Spain's Volkswagen Audi branch has also halted sales. More than 3,300 vehicles in stock are now being withdrawn from showrooms. SEAT says 700,000 of its cars and trucks have this diesel engine. They were sold worldwide. The company says it's investigating how many and in which markets. It's also setting up a search tool on its website to help customers figure out if their cars are affected. For NPR News, I'm Lauren Freyer in Madrid.
The Dow is up 28 points at 16,026. This is NPR News. In Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams will not be prosecuted in connection with the 1972 kidnapping and killing of a suspected British informer. Today's announcement by Northern Ireland's Public Prosecution Service also applies to 6 other suspected veterans of the Irish Republican Army. NPR's Leila Fadel reports the Irish nationalist leader welcomed the announcement, saying it's long overdue.
Jean McConville was a widowed mother of 10 who was snatched from her home in West Belfast and then killed. She was one of some 16 people known as the Disappeared, people who were abducted, killed, and secretly buried by the Irish Republican Army in the 1970s and early 1980s. Northern Ireland's prosecutor's office said there's insufficient evidence to convict, but an 8th person was charged last year with soliciting McConville's murder. Gerry Adams leads Sinn Féin, the nationalist Irish party that was alleged to have links with the IRA, although Adams has always denied that. Leila Fadel, NPR News, London.
Reynolds American is selling non-U.S. rights to assets of Natural American Spirit, one of its most popular cigarette brands, for $5 billion in cash. The buyer is Japan Tobacco. A South Dakota Indian tribe reportedly says it's preparing to open the nation's first marijuana resort. The Flandreau Santee Sioux tribe plans to grow its own pot and begin selling it New Year's Eve in a smoking lounge that it says will be set up with a restaurant, bar, nightclub, and other services. The tribe says it anticipates a revenue of up to $2 million a month. It's seeking to expand on its casino, hotel, and ranch businesses.